Hello, Tim here. Welcome to my channel. Today is a little bit of a story time, flashback, and a little bit of remembrance of something I did in high school days. Perhaps some of you are collectors. I think we all are, one way or another. And for me, my collecting started in third grade or so when I started collecting pennies. And pennies and nickels, because they were cheap to acquire. You could get a lot of pennies for a nickel and a whole lot more for a dime, and pennies, people usually give them to you. But one day I happened to be walking past some guys that were, one of them had a nickel just like this one here. And this is a Jefferson nickel, about 3-inch diameter. And they're tossing around, just kind of laughing, and they're quite a bit older than me. And being rather shy, I didn't ask to see it up close. But I just thought, I want one of those things. And some time passed, and I forgot about it. Years later, in high school, I took a class in metal shop. And one of the options I could do, they had a foundry there where I could work with cast metal, cast aluminum mainly, and it has certain patterns and things that you could cast things from. And I thought, well, I'd like to find one of these nickels and cast that. So one of my classmates was a coin collector too. I asked him if he had any idea where I could get one of these, a big one. And he didn't have that. This particular nickel I didn't acquire until probably 10 years ago. I had talked to him, this friend of mine, about wanting to carve a nickel, particularly a buffalo nickel. He gave me this uncirculated one that's a buffalo nickel with a date of 1938 on it. The detail's very crystal clear as far as a nickel can be. And I got a piece of pine, 8-inch diameter, and started to draw on it just by seeing what I saw and translating it onto the wood freehand. I drew it, and then I worked with X-Acto tools for several weeks to carve a nickel, and this is what I came up with. This is the wooden nickel that I made. Now, my story about working with this nickel, and here's the back side. So in high school, at that time, you could walk around with knives. I had X-Acto tools, and I had some palm tools. They're kind of in a little case, and I'd carry them with me in class. I worked on them in study hall. I went to work on them in shop class. So wherever I could get a free moment, but I didn't want to show off my work. I didn't want many people to see me what I was doing. I'd often go to the library and sit in a study carrel with a big open book like an atlas and chip away on this with these tools and leave the chips in the book and put the book back on the shelf and leave it there. So I don't know whatever happened when they found that. It would be the end of the period, or I'd cut myself and I'd have to quit. And I usually didn't want to tell anybody, so I would carry Band-Aids with me to deal with that. I was sitting in a empty lunchroom, nearly empty lunchroom after lunch, and probably study hall period. I don't remember exactly when. So I was carving away on this thing. I heard a voice from behind me say, "That's really good, sir." And I turned around, and it was one of the prettiest girls, senior girls. I was a junior at the time. And my face went beet red. And I just said, "Thank you." And then she went on, and I know a lot of guys probably had crushes on her. I know I did, but my confidence grew after that. So I finally got this done. The big day came when I was in metal shop. It was casting day. They didn't cast every day. They'd have to heat up the crucible and melt the aluminum, and it takes a couple hours to do that. So when the mold was ready, the sand mold was ready, and the aluminum was melted so it can be poured. We poured it in there, and it had to wait a day for it to cool down. So I was excited to open up and see what I could see in the finished casting. And this is one of my first casts, and the Indian side came out pretty good, but the back side didn't do so well. It kind of failed there. I don't know what happened, didn't fill in. So I made probably 6 attempts at casting, 5 or 6, I don't remember how many. And this is the best one that came out. Both sides were pretty good. And I found out after you're done casting in aluminum, there's so much more work that has to be done to clean it up. So you have to take off the what they call sprue hole, where the aluminum is a channel that goes in to flow in the aluminum. That has to be cut off and ground. And I found out another thing about pattern making is that in these areas here, the lettering got filled in. And that's because on my pattern, I didn't do a draft on the letters. So all letters have to have a little bit of a draft so that it pulls out of the sand mold without pulling some sand with it. I feel really disappointed in myself that I did this, but in the 70s, it was popular to in the decoupage era. And by the way, it's brown because it got kind of dirty while I was working on it, so I stained it too. But I also distressed it with everything I made at that time. I would beat it up and make it look old and pound things on it. I wished I hadn't done that. The original pattern that I made wasn't like that. And then it fell a time or two. Now it's just part of its history, and I just leave it alone. But I'm disappointed that I did do that. So I didn't want to rework the lettering in trying to correct that. I didn't have enough time left in the school year to fix that. So it's not an easy fix on the mold, on the pattern. And when I tried to grind this out with a Dremel tool, I found that that's pointless to do. So carving wood is a whole lot easier than carving aluminum. And I've been a wood carver ever since. And that's my nickel story. Now it still inspires me today to see or find a buffalo nickel. But the nickels are kind of inspiring in other ways too, because there's a lot of sayings that go along with nickels. Like if I had a nickel every time I heard such and such, whatever. Or don't take any wooden nickels. Or Yogi Berra's famous quote, the nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. Well, that might be true for him, but for me, my experience with the nickel and what it is, this one, is priceless. And for those of you that are 9 or 10 years old, and I've got a penny for your thoughts. So if you take a look at that and you feel like I want to carve something like that, I would say go for it, see what you can do. That's my nickel story. Thank you for watching. Please give it a thumbs up. We'll see you next time.